Hello students, this is lesson number 11. It is called Connecting Equations to Graphs. Let me move my face out here a little bit. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start on this. They want us to start out here with rewrite these. Rewrite each of these quotient as a sum or difference. Alright, so this is something you have to make sure that you recall from your work with fractions. Right? This first one, whenever you have an addition or subtraction in the numerator, you are allowed to split it into two different fractions. All right? If it's in the denominator, you cannot do that. It's only when you have it in the numerator are you allowed to split through addition and subtraction the numerator. Okay? So what this does is you take the 4x is divided by 2 minus, because we have a subtract here, minus 10 divided by 2. And then since you have a single individual fraction, now you can reduce it. Well, 2 goes into 4 2 times, so you get a 2x. And 2 goes into 10 5 times, so it's a minus 5. So there's your final answer right there. You've reduced it to that. Same thing here. I have an addition subtraction in the numerator. I'm allowed to split it. So I'm going to go and take this, and 1 divided by negative 2 is right there. And I'm going to subtract then this entire thing. I'm going to subtract the 50 divided by negative 2. All right? So you still get a negative 1/2. But here you got to make sure you watch your signs, okay? You're subtracting essentially a negative right here. This 50 divided by negative 2. What that turns into is 50 divided by a negative 2 is equal to a negative 25. So you're subtracting a negative 25, so it becomes positive. All right? And of course the x is brought along with it and ends up right there. Okay? So remember that. Be very careful with your negative signs. They will trip you up. Moving on. Now this first one, I have multiplication up here and the addition and subtraction. So they're trying to be a little bit sneaky on us. Okay? So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and distribute this, distributing 5 across this expression here, or distributing multiplication over addition or subtraction. All right, so 5 times x is 5x, 5 times 10 is 50, there's a plus inside here, so there's a plus here. I now have an addition subtraction in the numerator, so I can go and split it up. So I have 5x divided by 25 and 50 divided by 25. Well, 5 goes into 25 5 times, all right, and the x just gets to stay on top. Now if you want to write this as 1/5 x, that's perfectly fine. It's still acceptable. All right? And 25 goes into 52 times, so that one's acceptable too. So either one of those forms is going to work for us. This next one, now they're being really tricky. Really tricky. They're putting a fraction inside of a fraction. This is tricky. Okay? So let's walk through this step by step. Again, we have addition subtraction in the numerator only. I'm allowed to split it. So we're just going to do a very raw split to start out here. I got a negative 1/5 x divided by 2. And then I got 5 divided by 2. Okay, and there's my little x from before, so that gets carried along with it. Okay, so this little fraction here is very well behaved, so I'm not going to worry too much about this. But this one is the tricky one. All right, you got a fraction divided by a number here. Let's go and dissect that a little bit. That's the same thing as a negative 1/5 divided by a 2 divided by 1. All right. Now that we've restated the 2 as a fraction, whenever you divide by a fraction, remember what you need to do? Well, you're supposed to do the reciprocal and multiply. Okay. That's kind of like that double negative when you subtract a negative. Well, now here you're dividing by a fraction. And you got to remember, a fraction is just, this is why that division symbol looks like it is. There's your fraction bar right there, and it says everything on top gets multiplied together, everything on bottom gets multiplied together. But when you actually cross this, that's when the division actually happens. Okay? So what this is equivalent to is a negative 1/5 times the reciprocal of this. So rather than 2 divided by 1, it's going to be 1 divided by 2. That's the equivalent statement. Now you can just simply multiply this across, and you get a negative 1 divided by 10. All right? And of course the x tags along with this, so there's where your x is. And of course your 5/2 didn't change this entire time. So that's how they got this. So remember that little trick. Whenever you have a fraction divided by a number, restate it as a fraction, and then just treat it like you've always treated, dividing by fractions. Reciprocal, and then multiply. Okay. All right, moving on to 11.2. Graphs of two equations. Look at that. All right. So we got a couple equations here, and we have an a y-intercept at 0, 450. X-intercept at a little bit over 22 here, just a little bit over. On this one we have a 0, 8.33, and then over here we have a, looks like about maybe a 12.5 or so. All right, we'd have to go and find on that one. Okay, so about 12.5, 0. First graph represents this right here. Okay, so 450 is your intersect right there. So that's 0, 450. And you have a slope of a negative 20, so this goes down. And the slope here is 20. You can represent that right there. You go from here to here. There's negative 200. And you go over by 10. Well, 200 divided by 10 is 200. And since it's a negative and a positive, your slope is negative 200 divided by 10. So that's where they get the negative 20. And there's your slope. All right? And it describes the relationship. Where in the graph can we see 450? Where can we see a negative 20? Well, we just kind of answered that. The 450 is starting point in gallons. Negative 20 is the slope. We already kind of figured that one out right there. What do these numbers mean in the situation? Well, 0, 450 means that you start at times 0 at 450. That's at times 0. That's where you're starting at. And the negative 20 means that you're taking out 20 gallons, okay? 20 gallons per minute. Remember when we did the math here, the slope, that's negative 200 gallons. That's a positive 10 minutes. So that's gallons per minute. That's what that means, okay? What's the negative 20 mean? Gallons per minute. Negative 20 is the slope, and it's in gallons per minute. Always remember, when you have a slope, you have this fractional units here, like miles per hour, dollars per car when you go through a car wash. That is a slope, essentially, that you're working with. What do these numbers mean in the situation? The tank starts at 450 and when full and uses 20 gallons every minute. Of course, as you're using it, you're withdrawing the water out of the tank. And so it gets to be less volume in there until finally it's empty after about 23 minutes. Okay, let's start with the second one. The second graph represents 6x plus 9y equals 75. It describes the relationship between pounds of almonds and figs. So you have almonds in pounds along this axis. You have pounds of figs in this. All right, and so here is your relationship. The 6 is with the almonds, so it's going to be $6 per pound. And the 9 is going to be the figs, $9 per pound of figs. Suppose the classroom said, I'm not sure the graph represents 6x plus 9y because I don't see the 6, 9, or 75 anywhere on the graph. All right. So we can go and take this thing and kind of put it back into this form that looks like this. All right. We need to take this and make it look like y equals mx plus b. And we can go and solve for a lot of stuff. Okay? So let's look at that thing. So what I want to do is I want to take 6x plus 9y equals 75. All right. I got the x and y on one side. I want to just get the y on one side, the x on the other, and have some kind of a slope, okay? So I got to figure out all this stuff. Okay, so let's go through that. Well, if I want to get x on the other side, I got to go and subtract it to get over here. So 9y equals, if I subtract it, it's a negative 6x, and then I still got the plus 75. All right, you'll notice how I went and organized this. I put the x thing right in front, and I put the 75 on the back side. Okay, so I make it look a lot like this thing right here. Let me move my face. All right, so what do we got now? Well, I have 9y. I don't want 9y's. I want 1y. So let's divide everything by 9. 9y divided by 9 is just simply y. 6 divided by 9, well, that's the same as 2/3. So that's a negative 2/3 x. I love fractions, so I keep it like that. And then 75 divided by 9. I wonder what that could possibly be. Let's see. 75 divided by 9 equals, look at that, 8.333 plus 8.33. All right, I'll just put a little repeat after that. You can represent it as a form of a fraction if you want, but that's pretty good. So what's this telling me? It tells me that my slope is negative, so it goes down left to right. And that 8.33 tells me when x is 0, it hits the point 8.33. Right? So when we look at our graph here, that's why we have an 8.33 right there, because it's the point, 0, 8.33. All right. So it says, how could you show your classmate that the graph indeed represents the equation? Well, let's see. It goes through at that point, and if you were to go and look at the slope, it goes down 2 and over 3. So down 2 and then over 3. And so it hits those little marks right here, right? Down 2 over 3. Down 2 and over 3. Right? Constant slope all the way down. Okay? So yeah, this is exact same equations. Okay, so we got a little bit of a matching game here. So I've got this set up where I have all these little equations here, and I got to figure out which one of these slopes and intercepts these match up with. All right. So these are all in what's called a standard form. The easiest way to go and recognize where the slope is and where the y-intercept is to put these in the y-intercept form. Y equals mx plus b. So this is our first step. We basically take these and we put them over into this format where you have y equals some kind of an x system and the number, right? So the x part and the number all on one side. So I got to move this over, so I get 3y equals a positive 4x plus 3, and then divide everything by 3. So I have a 4/3 x, so my slope is 4/3. So let's see, 4/3. There's a 4/3, there's a 4/3. And if I look at my y-intercept, 3 divided by 3 is 1. So 4/3 and 0, 1. Hey, that looks good. So b is taken care of on that first one. Let's go to the next one. All right, I'm going to move the 12x over. So I get negative 4y equals the negative 12x. Again, you'll see that I always put that negative 12x, or that x part that I move over in front. It's going to make my life a lot easier. All right, get used to that. And then a plus 8 keeps along, and so then I divide by that negative 4. So I just get a single y, and then negative 12 divided by a negative 4 is a positive 3. So let's see, I got 1 here and I got 1 here. All right, so that narrows it down. And then 8 divided by negative 4, that gives me a negative 2. So that's out. Oh, look, e works. So there you go. That's how you solve for that one. Next one, I got to do the same thing. I'm going to subtract the 8x over the other side. I put it in front, making my life easier. And then I divide both sides by 2. So I get y equals, let's see, negative 8 divided by 2 is a negative 4. Well, that's the only one with a negative 4. Let's see if the back part works. 16 divided by 2 is an 8. Yep, if I put in a 0, I'll get an 8 out. So yeah, that one works. So that one, delta, goes with 3. Let's look at this one. This one's kind of screwy. There's a couple ways I can work this one to make my life a little bit easier. We'll just go with what we have here. I can go and move the negative x over to here. So I get 1/3 y plus x plus 1/3, right? And since this is 1/3, how do you undo multiply by 1/3? Well, that's essentially divide by 3, right? Because the 3 is the denominator. How do you undo divide by 3? Well, you multiply by 3. So you multiply everything by 3. So that becomes a y. that becomes a 3x, and then 1/3 becomes a 1. Okay, so where's that at? I need a slope of 3. I got 2 of them. That was already taken. And then a y-intercept is 0, 1. Well, there it is. So that one will be A. And then this last one, I'm going to add 4x to each side. So I get 3y equals 4x minus 6. And then divide by 3, which is the coefficient of the unknown. Divide by 3. So I got a 4/3, it's positive. Okay, I got these two. That one's already been used, so we'll concentrate on this one. And 6 divided by 3 is 2, but I subtract it, so it's going to be a negative 2. And there it is, right there. So number 5 is C. Are you ready for more? Yes, of course we are. Each equation in the statement is in the form of ax plus by equals c. For each equation, graph the equation on the same coordinate plane. Graph the line passing through 0, 0, and AB. What's true about each pair of lines? I want to kind of diverge a little bit from this. I want to go and take ax plus by equals c, all right, which is the form that they had up here. I want to take this thing and just simply solve it for y. I want to go through the same steps, and I'm going to take this base equation here, and I'm just going to go and solve it for y. So how do I do that? Well, I got to take the ax and I got to move it over here. All right, so that becomes by equals a negative ax plus c. And then what was the next thing that I did up here? Well, then I would divide by whatever number was hanging out in front of here. Okay. So I'm going to divide both sides by b. Y equals negative a divided by b x plus c divided by b. So if I took this and I just simply put in these values up here, I could actually get this. Let me show you. If I took negative 4x plus 3y equals 3. Okay. That's A, that's B, and that's the C. Let's just substitute it in to this thing right here. Y equals a negative A. Well, let's see, A is negative 4, so a negative A would be a plus 4 divided by the B, which is a negative 3. And there's my x, just like before. And then plus c. Well, what's c? Well, c is 3 divided by the b value. What's b? Negative 3. All right, we'll do a little bit of cleanup here. So that's a negative 4/3 x. And then I'm going to add 3 divided by negative 3, so that's the same as a minus 1. Well, what do we have up here? All right. I have, let's see, oops, my bad, I made one small mistake. This should be a plus. My bad. B is a plus 3. So let's go back through this real quick here. A negative a, all right, so minus a would be a plus 4. I'm dividing it by b, which is a plus 3. All right, and that makes that plus 4/3. And then if I go to the next one, c divided by b, there's the c, which is a 3, divided by b, which is a plus 3. 3 divided by 3 is 1. And so, what does it do? Well, if you look at this, we decided that b goes with number 1. Slope is 4/3. Yep. And the intercept is at 0, 1. If I put a 0 in here, the only number left is 1. So that's the equivalent statement. So you can, if you want to, you can use this little primer here to tell you what the slope is and what AB. So you can actually look at these things and tell me what the slope is. So you just compare these two numbers, all right? You're going to have the a divided by the b, and then change the sign. What's that mean? You take the a divided by the b, so negative 4 divided by 3, and then change the sign. Yeah, you got 4/3. 12 divided by negative 4, that's a negative 3. Now change the sign. Oh look, it's a 3. 8 divided by 2, that's a positive 4, but now change the sign. Minus 4. Negative 1 divided by 1/3, that's a negative 3. Now change the sign. Oh, it's positive 3. But here, negative 4 divided by 3, that's a negative 4/3. Now change the sign. Oh, positive 4/3. So you can, if you get really good at this, you can look at these equations and you can tell me what the slope is just by looking at it. What about the y-intercept? This little part down here, c divided by b. What can I do? Well, 3 divided by 3, there's your c, there's your b, right? C divided by b, 3 divided by 3 is 1. Right there. 8 divided by negative 4, that's a negative 2. Boop, right there. 16 divided by 2, that's an 8. And there it is. 1/3 divided by 1/3, well, that's a 1. There it is. Negative 6 divided by a positive 3 is a negative 2. Boop, there it is. So this comes in real handy for you just to go and remember how to do this, okay? You connect these two, and then you connect these two. These two are on the same side, so you change the sign. These are on opposites, so you maintain the sign. So just kind of remember that for yourself, all right? That's just an easy way to go through this. All right? And now for a little summary. What's happening here? Well, the summary just basically goes through, and it sets up some situations for you. It gives you this little line here. It gives you the y-intercept. And since you got 2 points here, you can go and figure out slopes. Same thing over here. You can come down and then over, and you can figure out the slopes. And you know the y-intercept. Okay? So that 0, 40, there's your 40. All right? 0, 40. And then what's your slope? Well, how tall is this? Well, see, it's down here it's 15, but then you go up to 35, so it went down 20. And then how far over did it go? Well, it went from a 2 over to a 10, so that's a plus 8. What about over here? Well, you're going kind of downhill, so you went from a 36 down to a 20, so that's a minus 16. And then you went from 2 over to 10, so that's a plus 8. Okay? So this one, because it's a little bit more, it's a little bit steeper on this one. Right? And your teacher can go through and just kind of explain more on that, but that's a quick, easy way to go and find slopes and y-intercepts by simply looking at this stuff, and your equation just poof will come right out for you. And this is just a kind of a carrying on of the same process. And your teacher will go through that to kind of explain a little bit more on that. It's very similar. I mean, you're solving, rather than x and y, you have p and t. You can do the same thing. Oh, look, what's 3? What's 1.5? What's 160? Well, remember your slope was the negative a divided by b, and your y-intercept was 0, c divided by b. So let's see, if this one, if the a is at 3, so that's a negative 3, divided by a positive b, which is 1.5, well, that equals a negative 2. And if you look at this, 0, what's c? Well, it's a 60. And what's the b? Well, 1.5. So what's that turn out to be? 0, 40. So what's that telling me? If I rearrange this, t equals a negative 2p plus 40. There's your negative 2. There's your slope. And there's your 40, which is your y-intercept. Right? So there's any number of ways that you can maneuver these things around. But remember that little slope is negative a divided by b, and your y-intercept is 0, c divided by b. And you can look at the numbers and just spit out the answers. Pretty pretty slick. Well, that's all there is on this lesson. So we'll continue on next with the lesson 11 practice problems.